He was bleeding into the snow. That was the first thing Lady Cecily Wyndham saw when her boots crunched through the frozen bracken of Blackwood Forest on that bitter December morning. Not a deer, not a fox, not any of the woodland creatures she had half hoped to sketch in her journal. No. What she found, sprawled at the gnarled roots of an ancient oak, his scarlet uniform torn and darkened with blood, was a man. A man who by every indication of heaven and earth was very nearly dead. Cecily's breath left her in a white cloud. She was, by her own admission, a practical creature, the sort of woman who managed the household accounts at Wyndham Hall while her ailing father dozed by the fire, the sort who did not shriek at the sight of injury. And yet her heart seized with a violence that surprised even her as she knelt beside the stranger, pressing gloved fingers to the cold column of his throat. A pulse, faint and fitful, but there. "Good Lord," she breathed, "do not you dare die, sir. Not here, not in my forest." He did not respond. Of course he did not. His countenance, even in its pallor, was arrestingly fine. Dark lashes lay still against sharp cheekbones. His jaw was strong, shadowed with days of neglect, and his hands, large, capable hands, were curled against the frozen earth, as though even in unconsciousness he was reaching for something he had lost. Cecily did not waste another moment on admiration. She tore a strip from her petticoat without a second thought for propriety, bound the deep gash along her side with firm, practiced pressure, and then, through sheer unladylike determination, half dragged, half carried the man the quarter-mile back to Wyndham Hall. It is worth noting that no one in polite society would have believed it of her. Lady Cecily Wyndham was considered gentle, quiet, the sort of young woman described at assemblies as rather bookish and pleasingly unremarkable. She was 22 and unbetrothed, which was, in the year of our Lord 1813, considered something of a private catastrophe by every matron of the county. But in that frozen forest, quiet and unremarkable she was not. She was magnificent. The stranger lingered in fever for 3 days. Cecily sat with him in the blue guest chamber each night, long after the servants had retired, listening to the wind batter the ancient eaves of Wyndham Hall. She changed his dressings. She pressed cool cloths against the burning fever of his brow. She read aloud from her father's old volumes of poetry, not because she expected him to hear, but because the silence was unbearable, and his breathing steadied somehow when she spoke. On the second night, he murmured something, a name, or perhaps a title, something that sounded, in his broken delirium, like Heartmore. Cecily set down her book. She studied his face in the flickering candlelight, the shadows dancing across the strong lines of it, and told herself it meant nothing. Soldiers dreamed of battlefields. Soldiers dreamed of fallen comrades. It was not her place to wonder. But wonder she did. He woke fully on the 4th day, grey eyes opening to find her seated at the foot of the bed, spectacles perched on her nose, annotating a botanical sketch with furious concentration. "Am I dead?" he rasped. Cecily looked up, thoroughly unimpressed. "Emphatically not, though you made a considerable effort." A long pause, then, astonishingly, the corner of his mouth curved. "You are the one who found me." "I am. You were bleeding rather dramatically beneath the old oak near the eastern ridge. It was inconvenient." He laughed at that, a rough, wondering sound, as though laughter was something he had not recently permitted himself. "I owe you my life, madam." "You owe me a petticoat," she replied, quite seriously. "A fine one, Belgian lace." His name, he told her, was Captain Edmund Vale. He had been separated from his regiment in the crossing south through the county, waylaid by 2 men on the old Blackwood road, and left for dead. He offered this with a measured economy of a man accustomed to briefing commanding officers, precise, controlled, and entirely without self-pity. Cecily, who had spent 3 nights watching this man fight death by sheer force of will, found she believed every word. She also found, to her very great alarm, that she did not wish him to leave. Friends, if this story is already pulling at your heart, if you feel Cecily's pulse quicken alongside yours, please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to the Duke's Lost Letters. Your support truly keeps these stories alive. Now, back to the forest's most dangerous secret. Edmund Vale recovered with indecent swiftness for a man who had been half dead in the snow. Within a week, he was walking the long gallery with Cecily at his side, his steps still careful, but his bearing unmistakably that of a man who commanded rooms. He admired her father's portrait collection with genuine interest. He debated the merits of Wordsworth versus Byron with startling conviction. He listened, truly listened, when she spoke of her mother's rose garden, now gone to frost and neglect, and the way the light fell through the orangery windows on winter afternoons. Cecily's heart, that previously sensible organ, was becoming profoundly inconvenient. She told herself it was gratitude on his part and mere benevolent care upon hers. She told herself this very firmly every evening when she extinguished her candle. She believed herself less and less each time. Then came the morning of the letter. She had not meant to see it. A sealed correspondence had arrived at Wyndham Hall, addressed not to Captain Edmund Vale, but to, and she read it 3 times before the words resolved into sense, His Grace Edmund Ashton Vale, the Duke of Hartmore. Cecily stood in the cold hall for a very long moment. The letter trembled slightly in her hands. Outside, frost jeweled every window pane. From the gallery above came the measured, even steps of the man she had taken to calling, privately and with great tenderness, her soldier.
Her soldier! A duke! She thought of every unguarded conversation, every afternoon she had perched beside him without ceremony, without the careful architecture of rank and formality that such a man demanded. She had argued with him, she had teased him, she had read him poetry in the small dark hours, and never once imagined, "You have found me out." She spun. Edmund stood in the doorway of the hall, dressed and composed, his grey eyes steady upon her face. There was something in his countenance, not guilt precisely, something more painful than guilt, something that looked bewilderingly like fear. "You are the Duke of Hartmore," Cecily said. Her voice, to its great credit, did not waver. "I am. And you did not think to mention this." He crossed the hall slowly, stopping before her with the deliberate patience of a man who understood he was on very uncertain ground. "I told you my name. The rest, the title, the estates, the endless machinery of who a man is supposed to be, I confess I was not eager to import all of that into the only place I have felt in 3 years of war entirely at peace." Cecily looked at him for a long, suspended moment. The cold draught moved through the hall. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock ticked with solemn indifference. "That," she said at last, "is either the most romantic thing I have ever heard or a scandalous evasion of the truth. Possibly both." "Both," he agreed, with quiet honesty. "Will you hear the rest of it?" She did. He told her about Hartmore, the vast echoing estate in the north that had awaited him since his father's death 2 years prior. The title he had not yet allowed himself to inhabit, because inhabiting it meant accepting that the war was finished and that he must now become something other than a soldier. He told her about the loneliness of rank, the way a man of consequence was never simply a man. the way everyone who looked at him saw first and always the keys to the kingdom, the power, the fortune, the advantageous alliance, and never beneath all of that, the person who had once been a boy who loved the smell of winter forests. Cecily listened. She did not interrupt. It was perhaps her finest quality, and the one most consistently underestimated. When he was finished, the hall was very quiet. "I see you," she said simply. "I have seen you since the moment I pressed my fingers to your throat and found you stubbornly, wonderfully alive. I did not need your title then, Your Grace. I do not require it now." Edmund reached out and with great care took her hand. "Then perhaps," he said, his voice low and ardent with a feeling he had plainly carried for longer than either of them had acknowledged, "the Duke of Hartmore to consider allowing the woman who saved him properly, with your father's blessing and Belgian lace and all the ceremony the situation demands." Cecily felt the warmth of his hand through her glove. She thought of the oak tree and the snow and the faint, determined pulse beneath her fingertips on that December morning. "I shall consider it," she said, and then, because she was at heart entirely impractical where he was concerned, "Yes." And so it was that the Duke of Hartmore, the man who held the keys to a kingdom, discovered that the only door that had ever truly mattered was the weathered oak one at Wyndham Hall, opened without hesitation by a woman with a torn petticoat and an unshakable heart. Some doors, you see, are not unlocked by rank or fortune or the weight of ancient titles. They are unlocked by kindness, by courage, by a pair of steady hands that reach into the cold dark and refuse to let go. And if that ending found its way into your heart, dear listener, if Cecily and Edmund's story moved you even a little, then please give this video a like and subscribe to the Duke's Lost Letters so you never miss a single tale. Every like, every subscription, every comment you leave below tells me to keep these candles burning and these stories coming. Until our next letter is unsealed, good night, dear hearts, and may someone worthy always find their way through your forest.